Hello, it's John Cheek here from UniTasterDays. Today we're going to look at studying architectural technology at university, and this is one of our on-demand events. And we've covered hundreds and hundreds of different subjects where we essentially are going to be joined by a guest expert who's going to cover the areas here. Why you might be interested in studying architectural technology today, what to expect on the course if you did study it, application tips and careers. And the guest expert today is Carl Mills, joining us from Coventry University. Carl is the course director for the Architectural Technology Programme, but also the Vice President of Education at the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists. So an absolutely fantastic person to be speaking to us. And bonus today is, as well as hearing more about the course, Carl actually has a school visit today. So he's going to take us to the lab and also show us some of the facilities that are set up for the school, so you can get more of a grasp in terms of what you can study on an architectural technology course.
As John said, thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm only here to talk about the architectural technology as a whole, and then sort of some advice for people considering this profession. So you can think of architectural technology as the technical side of architecture. So if architecture was a coin, you've got the art and the design and the taste of art, the sort of the building and the sort of culture and sort of philosophy of architecture on the one side. And on the other side, you have the science, the technology, the firmness, almost the engineering side of architecture, of how the building goes together and how it works and operates within every little facet of that building. So you could say, how does it stand up? What's the structure? How do the building services work? How do you protect it from fire? There's many aspects to the technical architecture side of architecture, and that's where we come in. We're specialists within that field, and we take the art and we turn it into the built environment that we live in and operate in our day-to-day lives. So within that role, typically you're going to need a lot of problem-solving skills. So you'll come up with solutions to many different types of architectural designs. And with that, you will sit on design teams. So you'll be an important part of that process from the very start of the initial sort of client meetings and their demands and their brief to the delivery of the building and its occupation. So you will play an integral part from the very start to the very end of that building and beyond in some instances. So graduates in architectural technology at the moment can go into normal architectural positions. They can lead their own firms, and sort of once they have enough sort of experience and professionalism post-graduation. Part of that is being a chartered member, and we're very fortunate to have the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists as our professional body. They serve our profession incredibly well, and you can find those if you just Google the technology of architecture or CIT, you'll be able to find that information there. So I mentioned you can sort of go on beyond the building and sort of look after sort of many aspects of that design process. And a modern part of that is the information modeling. So you're designing in a three-dimensional format, and part of that role is managing the information that comes from it, getting all them participants. So you're talking about building service engineers, structural engineers, building surveyors, even in some instances. All of that information will need to be collected into one model or one design model, three-dimensional representation of the actual physical building that will be. And from that, there's a huge part of, or a huge amount of information that will come out of that needs to be controlled and managed. So that's called BIM. And that's a big part of some of our graduates now. So we're very diverse in our skill set, which leads us into many different roles within the construction industry. So in terms of what subjects may be of best use to you, if you're thinking about becoming an architectural technologist, as I tell my open day sort of visitors here at Coventry, we can take you from the very start of your journey to the very end. And when you wear your lovely graduation hat, you would then become a professional within the field of architectural technology. And as a skill set to begin with, we don't really have a distinct need as a civil engineer might have, where they require maths. Or if you're doing pure architecture, you'd need an art portfolio. So with us, we use a lot more software skills. So it's AutoCAD, SketchUp, Revit. So those kind of things then lead into the formal design process. So you'll start learning about how do you design, and then how does the building go together, the construction technology methods behind that. You'll also learn things like construction law and contracts, and you sort of engage with typically many sort of outside practitioners or projects that are based in real life scenarios. So you'll be given a real client brief, and that's something we like to do here in particular, which is so you get to meet the client and sort of see the need for the building, and typically visit somewhere like Myton Hospice or maybe a local school where we're doing an extension project on that, for instance. So entwining how your studies will impact the long-term benefits of society, I think is really important, and that's something we do. So in terms of back to the subject matter, product design is typically very good. Art and creativity. So what we try to do is maximize your creativity within this field, because this is the place where you're going to master the craft before you go into industry and then implement them skills that you're learning.
Thank you, Carl. Absolutely excellent. So I've got two questions, but the first question that springs to mind is about students that perhaps are interested in architecture and therefore seeing architectural technology and kind of comparing the two. And I know you touched on this in terms of your session as well, but do you mind just giving us an oversight in terms of the key difference between architecture and architectural technology, and why perhaps one student might want to consider architectural technology over perhaps architecture?
It's a really interesting question, and I get this asked a lot by potential students. So a good way to describe it is the architecture side is the art and the creativity and the ability to defend your decision making within panels as such. So you're looking at the outside, the form of the building, it takes a lot more precedence and sort of the beauty of the building. Whereas with us, although we do design and we can create beauty in lovely forms, we are much more concerned about the plans. So it's almost like, how do you do that plan, the sections of the building and the elevations, and how do you get those drawings and sort of construction details up to regulations and current standards. So for instance, you could say, okay, well, I want this, an architect might be more concerned about the position of a window within a wall. How close it to the edge of the outside wall, or has it got a really deep sort of position? Whereas for architectural technologists, it's more about how does that window and that opening to that building, how do we close it? How do we protect it from ingress of water? How do we protect it in terms of, does it have sufficient fire protection in some instances, or the certain type of glass that might be required at those levels and certain heights? So we're a lot more technical focused, much more sort of getting into the plans and into the construction detail. And that's not to put off that we also do design our own buildings, but we go a lot deeper into that design. Whereas with architecture, you're more about defending your reasoning and your ability to sort of give a person an experience that they might experience when they enter that building. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Carl. That's really, really handy. And just my final question is, in terms of the people that watch these videos are either students watching directly or schools watching with their school groups. And I'm conscious in terms of perhaps schools watching with school groups and teachers, they might not be as familiar with architectural technology as they would be, say, with architecture. And it'd just be really useful to get from you a grasp of how new architectural technology is as a subject to study at university. And linked to that, I've seen in the last year or so more about architectural technology than I ever have, which perhaps comes down to your work with the Chartered Institute and in your role as Vice President of Education, etc. But just really useful to get a grasp from you about how new the subject is.
So with architecture, of course, it's thousands of years old. Everyone recognised it. and it's sort of a very established sort of name within the construction industry. Whereas with architectural technology, you can go back to CIAT, it was almost the birth of architectural technology as a subject, which was back in 1965. So we're approaching nearly our 60th anniversary as a sort of as a professional body and as an industry. So that's kind of we're still sort of a young profession, you could say, but the sort of more complex buildings have become, the more important the role of the architectural technologist. A chartered architectural technologist does have exactly the same sort of rights of protection of an architect, as the ability to open their own practice and provide architectural services within the field of their sort of area and their area of knowledge. So being a chartered professional sits you at the top table in all of construction, and that's one of the key things that you should aspire to be once you are a graduate.
Chatting before, you mentioned that a school were visiting today to find out more about architectural technology. I wondered if there's anything that you can show us from that visit that'll be handy for students that are interested in studying the subject area from that visit today now.
So, as I mentioned, we have several visits throughout the year from schools and colleges, and we like to show them kind of some of the construction methods. So I'm in the lab at the moment, so there might be some noise around that. So I'll hold the mic a bit closer when I say this. So this is a concrete beam, and typically we make two concrete beams. We make one that's designed correctly, that will fail exactly as this one has failed, and we'll make one that's designed incorrectly, which will fail in shear. So it'll come from one corner down to the center, so the center down to the corner, and it'll fail in the shear that way. So this is a good indication of sort of the hands-on learning and the engineering behind the construction that we do, and why we use the products we do within construction.
So Carl is also going to show us something else as part of the facilities in the lab that is going to be super useful for you as well. So with that, Carl, I'll pass over to you again.
Behind me now is a full cutaway of a house. So it's a section of a house. And we bring the students down to see this and see how the construction within a domestic environment takes place. But what's important as well to understand is we will do things like technical drawings that look something like this. And this represents the physical building that we see behind us. So when we're drawing our plans, our sections, our elevations, we're drawing details that look similar to this. Obviously, there's a lot more specification and dimensions and information on there, but that's a good representation of the actual built structure that will take place.
Well, it just is left for me to say a massive thanks to Carl Mills joining us from Coventry University and also the Chartered Institute of Architectural Technologists. What a fantastic insight in terms of the course, but also some of the lab facilities. And thank you, Carl, for taking the time to take us into the lab and show us various things. So really hope you've enjoyed this session, which is probably unlike any other on-demand event we've ever seen before, because we've actually seen, as well as hearing about the course from the expert academic, we've also seen the facilities in the lab at the university. So huge thanks to Carl Mills joining us from Coventry University. See you soon.